Good evening, everybody. Welcome to ProductTank Cardiff. My name's Kai Hellstrom. I'm one of the co-organising gang here at ProductTank Cardiff. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. If it's your first time, welcome. If you're returning, thank you very much for coming back. A little bit about us. We're part of the world's largest product management community, and we're doing things in Cardiff. Some very special things, I like to think, some things we're very proud of. If you want to check out some of the content from our parent organisation, Mind the Product, please do. They've got heaps and heaps of awesome podcasts and videos from amazing speakers. In terms of how we're doing things in Cardiff, we are still running bi-monthly events with some awesome guest speakers. This is our second fully remote event because of the circumstances. And given the success of the first, we thought we'd try another one. So thank you everyone for joining us again. I've been speaking to some members of the community who've said that they miss the social evenings and the socialization aspect of things. We will be looking to get that up and running as soon as it's safe to do so. But when that is anybody's guess. Until then, we'll be continuing to run bi-monthly events. And we're currently in the process of finalizing our September's event, and we'll get some content out to you as soon as we've done that. You can catch up with us through our social media and chat channels. That's through the meetup page. You can find us there. Please join the community to find out about future events. You can request to join us on our Slack channel, or please do give us a follow on our Twitter page because we post quite a lot there, and we'll be increasing our posts shortly, but we post about all our events and everything that's going on within the community. Most of you who have been before will have had the pleasure of meeting Baf and Alex before. I'm relatively new to the community. Like I say, my name's Kai Hellstrom. If you have any recommendations, if there's any topics you'd like to see covered, if there are any speakers you particularly love to see, or if you have any feedback about the event, we'd love to hear from you. We're very easy to find. You can find us through any of the social media channels that I described earlier. Please do get in touch because we're participating in this community for everybody's benefit, and we'd love to know how we can make things better for you. And a final note, we still don't have a sponsor for this event. If there are any businesses out there that like to hear about the benefits of sponsoring one of these events and how it can help them, please do reach out to us because we'd love to get in touch with you. But I won't rattle on too much longer because I know that you haven't come here to see me. You've come here to see our two amazing speakers. We've got Tendayi Viki, who's going to be talking to us about an explorer's mindset, and Itamar Gilad, who's going to be talking to us about lean product management. And so without further ado, I shall bring Tendayi into the conversation. Good evening, Tendayi. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good evening. Looking forward to this.
Thank you very much. I know that like many, you're currently balancing work life with being a full-time parent. So thank you for giving us your time this evening.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm alone with the kids for this week. So after this, I gotta go make some dinner.
I think a lot of people are experiencing those challenges at the moment. Do you want to give the community just a quick overview of sort of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm associate partner at Strategizer, and I spend a lot of time working with large organizations in particular, trying to help them adopt, the innovation best practices that we know from the startup communities, how to sort of take an explorer's mindset and start, investing in projects using that. I wrote The Corporate Startup and another book called The Lean Product Lifecycle. And this year, I've just published my third book called Pirates in the Navy. So that's what I'm going to be sort of touching on a little bit throughout the talk today.
Well, excellent. I know everybody's very excited. To the community, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments because we will have the opportunity to ask those after the talk. And without any further ado, I'll leave you to it. Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, fantastic. My assumption is people can see my slides, so you can just confirm that, Kai?
Yes, absolutely. You're correct.
Okay. All right, perfect. So thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to just have a conversation with you about how an explorer's mindset can help, especially people that are leading innovation teams, lead those teams better. Now, this idea of like explorer is actually something that's an extension of a concept that I've been calling pirates in the Navy, which is the title of my latest book. And as we kind of navigate through this, you'll start to notice that even though innovators sometimes like to call themselves pirates, it may be better if they call themselves explorers or something much more connected to the company with which they actually work. And so it was Steve Jobs who actually said that it's better for to be a pirate than to join the Navy. That's what he is saying. And the reason why he was saying this was he was just trying to make clear this distinction between large companies and how slow moving they are versus startups and how entrepreneurial and fast moving they are. And so they even planted the pirate flag for the Mac team, right? Just to illustrate that they were going to disrupt, the way that people were currently working. But what's interesting is that one thing we also know is that large companies need to innovate. And a lot of leaders I talk to nowadays really embrace this idea that they need to get better at just doing really great innovation. They're seeing disruption from startups, changes that are happening really quickly. COVID-19 is a disruptor for some and an accelerator for others. And so all of these things are sort of happening around them, and they need to be making decisions about what to do. And so, if you're thinking about doing innovation in a large company, then this distinction between being a pirate and being in the Navy becomes kind of moot, because what you really want to be is you want to be a pirate in the Navy. Now, what's interesting about the conversations that we have around pirates, right, is that we tend to use the terms interchangeably. So we tend to say pirates and buccaneers and all types of pirates, and we use these terms interchangeably. But actually, these terms are not necessarily the same. And the key difference that I really like to highlight when I'm giving these talks is this distinction between a pirate and a privateer. And long ago, back in the days, a pirate was just a criminal roaming the high seas. They were unattached to any institution. They were just doing their work, raiding and looting. And if they were caught, they would be made to walk the plank. In contrast, the privateer was also a pirate, but the privateer was a pirate that had some level of institutional support, in the sense that they were actually working for a particular country. They were working in service of a specific country, and their role was to go out onto the high seas and raid and loot the ships of enemy countries. And so they didn't just like raid and loot any ship, or they were not unattached. They had institutional support. And so if you're an innovator within a large company, I actually think that trying to be a privateer rather than a pirate might actually be better for you in very many ways. So for example, it might be better for you when you're dealing with leaders, because if you're a pirate, leaders don't care about your work. So they're not going to invest in your work, right? Your work is much more likely to get killed. But, if you're a privateer, leaders are fully invested in the work that you're doing, right? In terms of your status, you have very low status, right? If you're a pirate, you're kind of low status within the organization. But if you're a privateer, you've got a little bit of a high status, right? Your people are celebrating your work. They're interested in what you're working on, and they're happy to invest in it. In terms of resources, if you're a pirate, you're constantly looking for investment dollars that are much more likely to get cut. Whereas if you're a privateer, the investment you get is likely to go up over time. And then in terms of projects, if your projects are found, if you're a pirate, they're going to get killed. But if your projects are viable, if you're a privateer, they're much more likely to be taken to scale. The message here is simply that what we want is for our innovators to think of themselves as connected to the institutions that they work for, and to be doing work that is aligned with the organizations that they actually work for. And so what's even more interesting, right, is that, most privateers like Sir Francis Drake, for example, who used to work for Queen Elizabeth I, ended up becoming explorers. So they moved from being just people that were on the high seas looting enemy ships to actually starting to explore different countries, different colonies, et cetera, et cetera. And whatever they bring back from their work, there's somebody ready to actually celebrate whatever they're doing. In contrast, if you're a pirate, you have no place to take your work. And a lot of innovators I meet are actually really frustrated by this. And so taking an explorer's mindset applies to the way that we actually do the work ourselves as innovators, but also how we lead the innovation teams. So it's also important for us to sort of really think about this distinction. So if we're saying that we want to be pirates in the Navy, we're saying we want to be privateers, and if we're leaders, we're saying we want to lead a team of privateers. Leading a team of privateers is very, very different to leading a team of regular people, the regular Navy that's just sort of doing their work within the organization and they're not breaking any boundaries, right? And so this distinction is not that strange. It's a distinction that's been talked about quite a lot now. The Lean Startup is based on this. Steve Blank made this distinction. And even earlier on, earlier thinkers were talking about how organizations have to balance between exploring new opportunities and exploiting their current success. And it's important that, leaders understand what this really means, right? Because the focus is actually different. When you are focused on exploiting current success, you're really talking about efficiency and growth. That's what you're really focused on. Whereas if you're exploring, you're focused on searching and trying to create new breakthroughs, right? So search versus execution is an important distinction to actually make. And then when you're searching, the one thing that's very clear is that uncertainty is high, right? Whereas if you're not searching and you're executing, uncertainty is actually low. Which then means that you need a different financial philosophy when you're doing this work. On the one side, you need to be using venture capital style risk-taking. And then on the other side, you actually want to make sort of safe bets. And the culture of the Navy versus a pirate ship are totally different. One is iterative, experimental, speed, failure, rapid iteration, whereas the other culture is much more about linear execution. And of course, you need different people to actually work on this. People who excel in uncertainty are better off exploring, and people who are sort of good at sort of managing, planning roadmaps are better on the exploit side. Now, this work is actually featured in Alex Osterwalder's new book, The Invincible Company, which is part of the Strategizer publications that we're doing. And in that book, he also presents this portfolio map, which is a way for organizations to sort of track exactly the kind of things that they're investing in. So companies have two portfolios. One is the exploit portfolio, where they're really focused on their current businesses, and they're asking questions about how lucrative that business area is for the company in terms of returns. And the thing that they're worried about the most is whether or not there's going to be disruption risk, right? Now, the other portfolio that every company should have is what we call an exploration portfolio. And in the exploration portfolio, you have expected return. You don't really know what the return is going to be. So it's just like, how much can we think this might turn out to be if it actually turns out to be successful? And then the real thing that really, really matters, and this is what we want to really highlight, right? The thing that really matters is what we call innovation risk. Innovation risk is the risk that an idea is going to fail. What are all the things that might cause this idea to fail? This is the distinction between, the exploit portfolio versus the explore portfolio. This notion of innovation risk and how you manage that really determines how you lead teams that are actually doing this work. So that really matters in terms of our thinking right now and how and how we take things going forward, right? Because in the explore is where you find your pirates. Like that's where you get your pirates in the Navy working. And so how you manage and collaborate with those teams and how you lead those teams becomes really, really, really important. And so let's talk about that then. Let's now move to really have this conversation much more directly. The conversation about how do you lead teams that are sort of exploring? What does exploring actually mean, right? And so most companies I work with have, an innovation project, maybe one or two innovation projects, but maybe they have one. Sometimes they have several, right? So a lot of companies now, have a lot of innovation projects going on. The challenge they have is that sometimes some of these projects never ever go to scale. They kind of stay in this permanent pilot mode, and everybody's just sort of working on them, and they already have their roadmap and they're executing on their roadmap. But once they enter the portfolio in a typical large company style, it's hard to get them out of the portfolio, right? Because everybody's protecting their idea and just making sure they get budget every year to keep working on their idea. And one of the reasons why this happens, right? Because leaders have sort of invested in this idea, and now rather than treating it as an exploration, they're now treating it as something that has to be protected because it's their pet project, right? And so one of the reasons why this happens is because leaders themselves think they can pick the winning idea on day one. So once they listen to a pitch and somebody shows them a business plan with really great projections and they put money in it, now they're committed. They don't want to let go of that idea. They're going to work on that idea come hell or sunshine. And that's the reason why they don't then follow up and see what's happening and push that idea to evolve so that it becomes something successful, or actually just stop investing in the idea if it's turning out that it's not successful. So we call this the tunnel, right? It's a tunnel. Once you enter the tunnel, you keep going all the way to the end. And what we often say to innovation teams in large organizations that are in the tunnel is that light that you see at the end of the tunnel is not potential success. It's a train coming at you fast, right? Because these ideas end up crashing. Once they get the investment, and the leader decides that, oh, that's an idea that I like, they are automatically moved to the exploit portfolio without ever being tested. Right? They don't test, they don't iterate, they don't check, they don't do anything. So that's an innovation funnel, right? That's an innovation tunnel rather than a funnel, right? So once an idea enters the portfolio, it stays. In fact, for most companies, just getting the idea launched seems to be the most important thing for innovation teams to do. That's all they care about, is getting their idea launched, because they know that once they've launched, they're in the business. Nobody's ever going to kill their idea. So that's not really an explorer's mindset. To have an explorer's mindset, what you really need to do is to think of the ideas you have as not in a tunnel, but as part of a funnel, right? So instead of trying to pick the winning idea on day one, instead of put them in this tunnel, you try and use a funnel, right, where you make small bets on these ideas, and then you track progress to see which ones are reducing innovation risk and also increasing potential return, and only put more investment in those ideas that are showing progress towards scale. So maybe these ideas are the ones that are showing progress towards scale, so they keep getting incremental investment. The remaining ideas, these ones, maybe they get stopped, right? And then you keep making more bets. And if these ideas are the ones that actually are showing success, these ideas are actually stopped. And then in the end, it is these ideas here that are taken into the exploit portfolio. So you can see that this is an explorer's mindset for managing your innovation portfolio. And this really, really matters for the decision-making that we're doing. So what is the mindset here? The mindset here is that you can't pick the winning idea on day one. And the mindset is that you anticipate from the beginning that you're going to have to get rid of some ideas, right? You're going to have to kill some of the ideas, and only a few of your ideas are the ones that are actually going to be able to go to scale. And so when you're doing an innovation board, you really have to be really clear about this. I think that one of the problems that we've had, especially with the lean startup movement, is that there's always been this assumption, right, that if you have an idea, right, you can always pivot your way to success. So if you like your idea, you can just keep working on it, and you can pivot your way to success. You can always, iterate, like we say. You can always iterate your way. This is the graphic, right? Iterate your way to success. But actually, lean startup really works better if you think about it as a portfolio, just like I was showing you here. It works much better when you think about it as a portfolio where you're making investments that go to scale, only for those ideas that are actually showing success, right? Like I was illustrating before. And so that's really, really important. Not all ideas can pivot to success. Lean startup is really great because it allows you to find very quickly those things that work so you can scale them, and also very quickly those things that don't work so you can kill them. That's really the explorer's mindset, and that's really what you want to bring to the conversation. Another illustration that we often use when we're working with leaders is to try and show them. So we often ask them this question: how many $100,000 projects do you think it takes to produce one mega success, right? And then they sort of start guessing. Some say 150, some say 250, some say 1,000, some say 10, right? And then we start to show them the actual numbers, right? So you want to get this one mega success here, right? That's what you're aiming for, this one mega success. And so the question is, how many projects does that take? And as Alex Osterwalder always then illustrates, 250 projects is what it takes to get one mega success. And from those, you'll get 162 failures, right? Ideas that you'll have to kill. And you'll get, these 87 that will be somewhat successful, kind of, they'll give you maybe back the returns that you've put in, but you'll get one mega success from the 250. Now, depending on the level of success you're trying to get, like billion-dollar success, you can lower the numbers. But if you lower the numbers to say 10 investments, and then maybe 6 will fail, 2 might know some, okay, my math is not working, 3 might know some success, and then 1 will become the mega success. That might work, but what happens is that the actual value of this one goes lower because you're not taking, as big a risk as you're supposed to. Now, where do we get these numbers from? We get these numbers from early stage venture capital. I think a lot of you that are working in startup understand this. When you're working in venture capital, 6 out of 10 of your investments lose money, 3 out of 10 make some money, right? And then 4 out of 1,000 are actually your home runs. And what we call home runs are those ideas that can give you 50x return. Down here you can see the level of return here. Anything from 10 to 50 times return are really great ideas to sort of work on. And so you can see that just with this, you can't pick the winning idea on day one, right? And so you have to be careful with what you do. And just this analysis, we did this analysis earlier on, and then it was confirmed again with some new analysis we did this year. And again, it's still the same, right? This sort of finding is actually confirmed. And so to embrace the explorer's mindset, one thing you have to accept is that leaders can't pick winners. Leaders create the conditions for winners to emerge. This is really, really important, right? Let's just dive deeper into that. Leaders create the conditions for winners to emerge. So imagine you're the leader of a kingdom in far, far away Europe in the 18th century. And a person comes to you and says, we want to go to explore the Americas to see if there's anything worthwhile there, right? You're not going to say to them, okay, great, write me your business plan. Tell me how much revenue we're going to generate from the colony over the next 5 years. You're not going to do that for them, right? You're just going to create the conditions because you don't know what they're going to find when they get there. And so the explorer's mindset is for leaders saying, okay, this is very different. This is not the same thing as our current business. So we don't know what these teams are going to find when they get there. And so the best way to sort of manage these teams is to create the conditions that allow us to learn what they've found once they've gotten there. And then we can take those learnings and make decisions about whether or not we keep investing in the ideas that they've explored. And that's the mindset that you need to really, really bring to the conversations that you're having internally. Which takes us to the portfolio governance, right? So how do you then lead the teams? Because they're not bringing any data. Leaders are so used to making decisions based on data. Leaders are so used to making decisions based on business plans that they don't actually realize that when a team comes to you and they ask you for $1 million, right? You think that you're investing in executing, but you're actually not investing in executing. You're spending $1 million to find out if the idea will work or not. Because as the team starts to execute, they're still going to find out if the idea is going to work or not. They can't brute force their way to success. And the more money you give to them, the higher the risk that they're actually going to be unsuccessful and execute the wrong idea. So when we make large investments in teams, we think we're investing in our teams to execute, but actually we're just investing in our teams to go find out if there's something there. The way they'll find out is not through an iterative way. They'll just find out by failing. The best way to then think about it is, okay, how much would I pay for information? I would not pay $1 million for information, for early information. And also, what do I want these teams to go figure out, right? And so the one thing that we often present to leaders, for these teams to go and figure out is what we call this sort of innovation formula, which is successful innovation is a combination of great technologies or R&D, but that's actually optional. What really matters is what we call business R&D, which is we want our teams, when they go out exploring, to discover if there's actually any real value that they can create for customers out there in the world. That's what we want them to go out there and start exploring. We want our teams to go out there and explore that if we discover that there's real value there to be made for customers, can we create a business model that will bring value back to us? That's the formula that we want them to go out there and actually solve. They have to go beyond their assumptions and really show the feasibility and viability of their projects, right? And that really, really matters in the way we actually lead. So before they have evidence that they've solved this formula already, we should just give them as much investment as they need or as little investment as they need to go and actually solve this formula. And that really matters in terms of how we actually lead these teams. And what they're searching for, right, are sustainably profitable business models, right? Steve Blank says this all the time, right? A startup is an institution that goes out to search for sustainable business models. Same thing with an innovation team. They're looking for sustainably profitable business models. And what they're starting with are the ideas that they're presenting to you. And their job is to search for those sustainably profitable business models. And as they're actually searching, they go on this journey, and then if they become successful, one of those ideas enters our exploit portfolio there. Now, this is a framework that we designed for Pearson, and it's part of my a book called The Lean Product Lifecycle. And so, in this process, we say that on the innovation journey, the Lean Product Lifecycle has 6 stages. Here, I'm just showing 4. So you go from having an idea, right? You go from having an idea from which you extract your assumptions, and then you go and explore whether or not there's a real customer need in the market. And if you find that there's a real customer need, you then validate if you can create a sustainably, scalable business model from that. And then only then, when you found something successful, do you then decide that you can scale it and move it to your exploit portfolio. And so you can see that having a framework like this can help leaders really manage their teams and make decisions that actually make sense, because at any given moment, you can actually ask yourself a question, which is, at what innovation stage is this particular idea, right? Like this idea here. If it's an explore, we know what we expect from it. And if this idea, which is different, is invalidate, we also know what to expect from it. And so the way we manage these ideas is actually to start thinking about that. And you can see here, this is just a visual of the Lean Product Lifecycle. You can actually check it out in the book, The Lean Product Lifecycle, if you want to read more about it. But here's a visual of the Lean Product Lifecycle. And this dotted line here that you're looking at, this dotted line here, this dotted line is the distinction between exploring over here, right, and executing over there. Right. And that's how we designed the Lean Product Lifecycle to actually function. And on this side, you're working with early adopters. On the Explore side, right, you're working with early adopters. You're working in days, weeks, and months, and you're really focused on customer discovery and innovation metrics and innovation accounting. Those are the things that are actually the focus of your work. And so the thing that also really matters when you're building these innovation frameworks and you're trying to take an explorer's mindset is you need to make this investment decisions along the innovation journey based on what we call metered funding, right? And so the journey from idea, explore, validate, grow is actually the journey of reducing innovation risk. That's what we're doing. We're reducing innovation risk. And as teams reduce their innovation risk, we increase investment in those ideas. And so, starting from idea to explore to validate until they get the chance to actually moving into the exploit. So you can see that investments actually go up as the teams show different levels of success. So you make small bets that increase as those teams show that they're reducing the risk in their ideas. So the funny thing is that companies don't make this distinction. So what they'll do is they will give sustained money to a team that's here in terms of innovation risk. But the team has already got sustained kind of level of investment, but the risk level is so high. If you do this, you're not taking an explorer's mindset, you're taking an execution mindset. And that really matters in terms of how successful you can be. What you want to make a connection between how much you get and how much risk still resides in the idea, right? And assessing the risk that is remaining in an idea is actually the leadership. That's how you lead in innovation. When you're leading innovation as a leader, you should always have a sense of how much risk is remaining in an idea. And how much risk is remaining in an idea is really connected to how much evidence the team are giving you in terms of whether they're making progress towards finding a sustainably profitable business model, right? And the sense you have of how much risk is still remaining in an idea then determines how much investment you're willing to put in that idea, right? If you feel that they're really ready for scale, you can give them the big amount of money. But if you feel that they still haven't found the right business model, then invest what they need to go out there and find the right business model. All right. And so I just want to share with you before I move on, in the Invincible company, Alex also and colleagues present an updated framework, that's kind of similar to what we did at Pearson. This is an updated framework that we're now using with large companies when we work on innovation. And you can see that in the early stages where people have just ideas, you can see that there's very few people involved. The work is done in days. And the investment we recommend that you invest nothing. You invest just $0 in that. Now, the criteria for making a decision of whether or not this team is allowed to move to the discovery phase are whether or not the innovation idea is aligned to our strategic goals, right? If it's aligned to our strategic goals, we will invest. We also want to know what are the early insights about customer needs and trends that inspired the team's idea, and do they actually have a discovery team that is committed and able to actually start working? The thing that really matters is alignment to strategic goals and having a team ready. We cannot ask them, how much money will you give me in year 5? This is not the right time to ask that question because they're explorers. They're kind of like loading up their bags, putting everything onto the ship. They're about to go to some place they've never been before. Nobody even knows whether they're coming back, right? So we just want to give them enough for them to go there and then tell us what they actually find there. Right? And so that really, really matters in terms of how we think about these things. Now, when they go into discovery, what we really want them to focus on is what we call problem solution fit, right? Are there customers out there who have a real need, and what is the potential size of that market? And you can see again that the team is small. They can do this work in 8 to 12 weeks, and we often recommend that you invest less than 100K. This is a recommended amount. If you're working, in space travel, you can spend more. But as long as you're really focused on understanding the customer jobs and pains, because that's how you come out of this phase, also whether your value proposition resonates with customers and whether customers are actually willing to pay. So you have to run experiments to show evidence that this is actually what's happening with your value proposition. Once we get confident that you've got something of value here, right, then you can move to the validation phase, where we say, can you actually now create the value proposition? Do you have the right capabilities, resources? Can the value proposition be created and delivered at a reasonable cost? Have you found repeatable channels to reach customers? These are things that are really important before we allow you to then go out into the world and scale your idea. And then you can get a large amount of investment there. Now, what I want to say is that it's really important that when you lay out a framework like this, it's kind of neat, but this is just a map, right? We always know that the map is not the territory. Whenever I meet teams, I'm working with teams that always have a hodgepodge of these things going on. So I've sometimes worked with a team that understands their customers' jobs and pains. They've also they're already making money. So they've already proven their business model at a limited scale, but then they don't really understand anything else. They don't know why the thing is working. And so you have to help them then figure out, why are customers paying? How do you make your customer acquisitions much more repeatable? I've also worked with teams that don't understand anything in the early stages, but they have some technology that is allowing them to create their value propositions, but they still have questions about what that's going to do. So you have to kind of benchmark where they are and then help them make decisions about what they're going to do next. So the framework is not like a straight line journey, right? It's more a bit of a mess. So you can actually do this here, right? Until you get to the point where maybe you're ready to actually start scaling, right? So that's what we're talking about here. It's just all these things are interchangeable. It's just that these questions, from an explorer's perspective, allow you to make decisions about whether the team's work is worth investing in at any given stage. Okay, so now the question becomes then, how do you make decisions? If there's a team coming at you, how do you actually make decisions, right? And what I've kind of learned from working with leaders is there's two sets of decisions they have to make. The first set of decisions happens at the beginning, when you first encounter the innovation teams. Either they're part of an accelerator program and they've kind of applied to join, or there were innovation teams that were already ongoing and you need to sort of start working with them, right? So, what do you do at the beginning and what do you do with projects that are ongoing? Those are the two sets of decisions that you have to make. And it's really important that you sort of maintain the explorer's mindset. A lot of teams assume just because they've been given loads of money to work, they now can just execute. And if you encounter those teams, don't allow them to suck you into their universe. Try and bring them back to reality to really think about what is it that they're actually working on. So in one of the companies that I was working with, I was training an innovation board. And what they asked me as a question was, listen, we're about to start encountering these teams that are applying to join our accelerator program. So, and it was very funny because the leader actually used the term true north. When we start asking these teams questions, what is our true north? What is the thing we should focus on and not diverge? And so what I did was I created for them this guide that I'm about to share with you, right? Which is their true north for when they encounter teams that are applying to join the accelerator program. And so I say, listen, your true north is, first thing we care about, is this project idea aligned to our strategic goals? We're not going to invest in any shiny object that comes on. So teams come in and go, hey, we've got an AI thing. We've got this other thing, this blockchain. And then you as a leader think, oh yeah, I've heard about AI and blockchain on the news. Maybe I should invest in that idea. That's not what we do, right? We really have to think about our strategic goals as a company. And then if a project is aligned to our strategic goals, we then invest in that idea. And that really matters for how we do the work as investment decision makers going forward. The next thing is the business model, as the team are presenting to you, is it described in a way you understand, or do you need to know more? So you can like prod the team a little bit and ask them to understand the business model that they're actually working on. And then the next one is, has the team identified the right hypotheses to test, or are they missing something important? Right at the beginning, as leaders, that's what we want to know, is like, okay, these things that they're testing, they're about to go exploring the Americas, right? But the way they've set themselves up, are they missing something important that could kind of bite them? Are they making assumptions that could sort of get them in trouble? How can we get them ready to really be focused on the right things to go and check for when they get there? Make sure that there's water that people can drink. Make sure there's land where we can build houses. Make sure that there's gold. Whatever it is that we want them to actually go out into the world and test, we have to make sure that they're focused on that as explorers. So are they testing the right hypotheses, right? And then teams will also be telling you what kind of experiments they want to run. And so sometimes teams just say, I'm going to talk to 10 customers, and then I'll come back and tell you. As leaders, you have to help your teams design good experiments by just asking them this simple question. Will the experiment you're planning to run produce the kind of evidence that will allow us to make informed decisions later on? Right. So it's like an explorer saying, yeah, we're going to go to the Americas, but you know what? We're just going to land on the beach, and then we'll do a couple of deals with the people on the beach, and then we'll come back. It's like, okay, that's interesting. And I guess we will learn that you can do deals with people on the beach, but it doesn't really tell us about the rest of the territory. And so are the kinds of experiments they're planning to run, are those experiments going to produce the kind of evidence that will allow us to make informed decisions later on? And if the business model you've accepted is deals on the beach, then that's fine, right? You can do deals by the beach, and that if they bring that kind of evidence, you're happy that that business model has actually succeeded. But if it's not, you have to press them a little bit more. The other one is whether the team is committed to driving the project forward. That actually really, really matters. And then this is another one that I kind of have leaders really think about. Has the team made a reasonable request in terms of budget and resources, given where they actually are on their innovation journey? Right? Are they asking for too much resource given where they are on their innovation journey? That's another mindset that you need to bring to the conversation as an explorer. And then finally, we often get leaders just to say what they're committing to as leaders to support the teams in their next steps. So this is one example of like just pointing leaders and giving them the explorer's mindset and showing them the true north of how they really need to be thinking about these innovation projects as they're working with them. Now, to help them have conversations, sort of help them along in the conversation, I also created this sort of document for them. And this document, I adopted it from Rob Fitzpatrick and Salim Virani when they were running their consulting company a couple of years ago. They came up with this idea called Pitch Bingo, where you just sort of give leaders examples of questions they could ask to teams. And then what I did was I said, these are examples of questions you could ask to teams for the stage where they are right now. the questions with the stars, so these questions here that have stars on them, these are the kind of questions you want to ask at this early stage, okay? You can ask all the other questions if you want to, but try and ask these questions here early, right? So that's what I had the leaders think about. And here's a couple of example questions that are on the pitch bingo. For example, what's the day in the life of a real customer? What does that look like, right? How do they address their needs right now? Another one is, I'd like to get a better sense of the value proposition you're offering, right? How does it help customers with their jobs, pains, and gains? Another interesting question could be, I didn't really understand the technologies and resources you need to create the value proposition. Can you explain that to me a little better, right? So these are all various questions that you could ask as you're working with the innovation teams. Questions about customer segments, questions about value propositions, and also questions about key resources, right? Now, you don't have to ask all of these questions. That really matters. That's why I also sort of gave the leaders the stars. You don't have to ask all of these questions, but these are just triggers, right? These are just, as you're listening to the team pitch, you kind of can tick to say, I didn't hear them talk about this, so I'll ask about that. I didn't hear them talk about this, so I'll ask about that. And you can see that none of these questions are asking about 5-year projections and revenue in year 5, et cetera, et cetera. They're really just explorer questions that are interested in helping the teams explore the ideas that they're actually working on. So that's at the beginning, when you're working with teams that are just starting out, that are at the beginning of their journey. But what about existing projects? So what we say with existing projects is try and sort of put them on a portfolio, right? So take all your existing projects, put them on a portfolio map like this, and kind of register 3 statistics. One statistic is, what is the expected return that you're expecting from the project? So 500 million could be the return that you're expecting. But again, this is just a guess. It's always a guess, right? We don't really want to sort of think about that too hard. Then the question becomes, how much money have you invested in the project so far, and how long have they been working on the project? So in this project, we've invested $150,000, and they've been working for 1 month. Now, on the portfolio map, what it does is it allows you to map 2 things, right? It allows you to also map, which really matters, it allows you to also map where they are on the innovation journey in terms of innovation risk, and then of course the return is there. So each one of these projects is getting mapped along these 2 dimensions, right? And so what that allows you to do is to see where teams are, so you can actually make those decisions. So the question becomes, well, how do you do the assessment? How do you do the assessment so that you know where team is in terms of innovation risk? This is a really important question for leaders, right? How do you do the assessment? Because here is where the decision making really matters if leaders are going to take the explorer's mindset. And so the way that you do that is we created this tool called the Innovation Project Scorecard. And what this tool does is that it assesses the progress that any team has made. So if you will me into any business tomorrow morning and you put in front of me 10 projects, I can work with those teams to assess where they are using this project scorecard, and then work with them to recreate this map for you, right? And the way that you do that is by simply asking the teams to score themselves, or you score the teams on a few dimensions. The first one here is strategic fit. Sorry, let me just go back there. So the first one is strategic fit, and what we really care about is whether or not the ideas are kind of aligned to what we're trying to build in the organization. But also what we really care about is whether the teams are reducing risk. So for example, are they reducing risk in terms of desirability? How much evidence do they actually have that their critical customer segments have the jobs, pains, and gains that are relevant for selling the value proposition? That matters, right? That's something that actually matters very much. And so we get the teams to score how much evidence they have. Do they have very strong evidence? Do they have poor evidence? And the interesting conversation I often have with teams is that teams often want to score themselves as having very strong evidence. And then I start asking them what evidence they have, and they say, we've done interviews with 10 people. Then I go, okay, maybe that's not really strong evidence. What we really want is evidence of people's behavior, right? Behavioral evidence produces much stronger evidence than just talking to people. Okay. Another thing that also matters is whether they found the right channels or the best channels to reach and acquire customer segments. How much evidence do they have of that? So we're just scoring teams, right, in terms of how much evidence they have for all of these things. How much evidence do they have for feasibility? For example, having the right technologies to create the value proposition. How much evidence do they have for viability, right? Are customers willing to pay? How much evidence do they have for that? How much evidence do they have for adaptability, which is the ability to actually scale? What is out there in the business environment, right? Is this idea really well positioned to succeed against, competitors? And what evidence do they have of that? And as we do the scoring, right, we can really see where teams are. So poor, maybe some good evidence there, some other evidence there, like that. And then you can really start to see, okay, this team has got some work to do. And the thing that's really important is also then helping them make a decision about what work that they're actually supposed to do, so they can get better evidence that will allow you to make more informed decisions later on, right? So that really matters too. And so with that assessment, as leaders, you're then able to actually make decisions. Now, in most portfolios, if they're really working on breakthrough innovation, the majority of the decisions you're going to make will be decisions to retire things. You'll be retiring loads of stuff. You might also make a decision to sort of pivot some of these ideas, right? You might also make a decision that some of these ideas persevere because they're doing really well. And then finally, if you find a project is really working, you can make the idea to transfer that project into your exploit portfolio. And so that's what the explorer's mindset is really all about. It's about making small bets, allowing teams to go out into the world and really find out whether their ideas are actually working. And if their ideas are working, you double down your investment in those ideas. And so thank you very much for having me. That's the end of my talk. You can pick up the 2 books that I was talking about, my book, Pirates in the Navy, and also Alex Osterwalder's new book, The Invincible Company. Both are now available on Amazon. Thank you very much. We can't hear you, Kai. You're on mute.
Thanks for letting me know that I was on mute. Thank you very much for that. That was awesome. Thanks for that insight. Super cool. We've got time for 1 or 2 questions. A few have arisen in the comments. Here's one. Great question from Idris Jill. At what point do you invest on physical prototype for testing an idea? Is that the explorer stage or the validation stage?
I think that it all depends on the thing that really matters is how expensive it is, right? So some physical prototypes are really cheap to make. So if it's cheap to make, then you do it. When we're talking about the explorer or the validate stage, sometimes we really just focus on how much is it costing us, right? And the teams just need to know their runway. If they're 50K, they're 50K. So if that 50K allows them to talk to customers, find out what customers need, and then build maybe a paper prototype or something like that to go out into the world and test that idea. And then later on, when they're in the validate stage, they can make more expensive prototypes, right? So it's really just about the kinds of prototypes you make rather than saying this stage is for physical prototypes and this stage isn't for physical.
No, wonderful. Thanks for that. And we got one more here. This is from John Kim. The question is, so you talked a lot about the explorer and exploring and exploitation, but I guess this is post-exploitation. Is there a framework that you're aware of to select products that may already be in the market to retire them or end of life? So post-exploitation.
Yes. So the lean product lifecycle that we built for Pearson, right? It goes idea explore, grow. So idea explore, validate, grow, sustain, retire. And in the book, the lean product lifecycle, we talk about how you manage the retiring of products that were already in the market. And in fact, when we worked at Pearson with my colleague Craig Strong and Sonia Kusevich and other people that we were working with there, we're really focused on working with some businesses to find things to retire. And we had kind of different metrics. It's been declining in revenue for the last 5 years. It's now actually losing money sometimes, or it's sort of not growing anymore. So these are all conversations that we were having within the organization.
Well, it sounds like another talk for another day. So we look forward to having you back for that one.
That's the assassin. The retire one is the assassin's mindset. How do you kill ideas?
That's quite a nice phraseology for it. Well, I know you got to shoot off. I know you've got children to care for. So thank you ever so much for joining us this evening and giving us your time.
Okay, cool. I mean, I'm happy to answer a couple more questions if people. I mean, I'm happy to stay on, but unless you guys have a program you're running.
Okay, well in that case, there's one more that I thought was a very interesting question, and that's what is, in your opinion, what is killing innovation in large organizations, and what can you do to reverse that trend? I'm sure you've got something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing. So before, the thing that was killing innovation in large organizations was because the leaders didn't think it was a priority. They didn't think it was something that they needed to do at all. But now that we're moving towards a conversation where people are accepting that innovation needs to happen inside large organizations, the thing that's killing innovation now inside large organizations is that leaders are managing innovation using the same tools that they used to manage things that are not innovation. So, and once you start to use those tools, innovation can never perform better than an existing product. Because if they say, like, how much revenue you make in 5 years? They're like, well, this is fictional revenue. This is real revenue. And then so all of these pressures become difficult for teams to actually work on. And that's why we're really doing this work of developing tools like the Innovation Project Scorecard, so leaders have something else to use to assess innovations and make much more informed decisions.
No, thank you. That's wonderful. That's very insightful. I'd like to say thank you ever so much for spending your evening with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure our paths will cross again. Look after yourself, and thank you very much for spending time with us this evening, Tendayi. Take care.
Cool. Thank you.
Take care now.
Bye.
And now I'm going to bring in our next speaker, Itamar. Gilad, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How's it going?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for being with us this evening. You're going to be speaking to us about lean product management, which is a subject which is very close to my heart. Process that I love and have much more to learn about. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and how you operate and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a product manager. That's the larger part of my career. I was a product manager for about 15 years, including at Google and at Microsoft and a number of startups. For the past 3 years, I've been coaching product teams and writing about product management concept and some concepts and some of the things that I've been writing about, I will cover today.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I won't bore the viewers with my voice anymore, and I'll hand over to you. And as ever, guys, if there's any questions, put them in the comments. We'll ask them at the end. Thank you very much. Take it away.
All right, everyone. So happy to be here. And I want to talk a little bit about what I consider to be lean product management. So let me start with a story from my ex-company, Google, and how it handles social networking over the years. So as early as 2004, Google already had a fully functional social network that was launched. It was developed by a guy named Orkut, and that was the name of the product itself. It actually caught on. And this is basically the same time where Facebook was just launching in Harvard University. But Google, I guess, I wasn't there, didn't completely get it, didn't invest enough in Orkut, and the usage kind of declined. Eventually, after a long, slow letdown, Orkut shut down. In 2010, Google launched another social network, a much more deliberate effort this time. This was Google Buzz, but the product ran into a big privacy issue, basically on day one, and never recovered. And then in 2011, Google went even bigger. It created this very large product, a fully functional social network. A lot of effort and marketing went into it. I had something to do with it when I worked in Gmail. I connected Google Plus and Gmail, and that too has failed. Why am I telling you all of that? Not in order to knock down Google. It's one of the best product companies out there. It has launched products that we all absolutely recognize and use, and many people love them. It's just to show you that even Google itself is struggling with the same core problem that all of us product managers struggle. That's the problem of uncertainty. You see, back in the day, it was possible to do market research. It was possible to kind of predict what product the market needs, whether it was a family car or packaged consumer good. You could create a plan, you could execute on the plan, you can move it into production, and you could kind of have a predictable business model. Today, none of these things is true. Basically, once we moved into the world of software and internet, the market has infinite choice, competitors come in and go, and there's a lot of uncertainty into everything we do. There's a lot of complexity in the markets. There's also a lot of complexity in our software and inside of organizations. So you never know when your product idea will run into one of these complexities and will get stuck on friction. There's also constant change. So even if you find product market fit today, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have product market fit tomorrow, because things are always on the move. So how do we deal with uncertainty? So I hesitate to show this slide because it contains words that you've heard a million times. They become kind of cliches. Everyone says they want to do it. Everyone says they're doing it. Customer focus, evidence-based decisions, agility, and empowered teams. These are very important principles that actually have a lot of merit. And in this presentation, I will try to give you not just fancy terms, but actually tools that you can implement in order to move your companies to actually move in that direction. So let me start with customer focus, and I will introduce the North Star metric. So every organization essentially needs to do two things: deliver value to a market, ideally lots of value to a large market, and capture value back. And the product is only the means to an end to do this. The product is not the goal itself. Obviously, if we deliver a lot of value and capture a lot of value, and these two things fit each other, we have a very successful business. Now, many companies focus on the captured value. They measure KPIs. There are many KPIs. There's revenue, there's profit, there's number of active users. The challenge is often to choose, and I suggest choosing one that is the most important, that's called the top KPI, and focusing on it. But just focusing on it will make us a sales-driven company rather than a customer-focused company. In order to balance this focus on the bottom line, we need to focus to create a different tool that is called the North Star metric. North Star metric is basically a metric that measures the total amount of value we deliver to the market. Let me give you a few examples. Oh, sorry about that. So WhatsApp always measures the number of messages sent. Why is that? Because every message sent is a little increment of value for the sender and the receiver. It's free. You can send it with rich media at any time to anyone in the world. If you compare this to SMS, that was kind of the alternative for most people before WhatsApp, it's a much better solution. So if on year one, we send 1 billion messages, and on year two, 2 billion messages, we can roughly say we double the amount of value delivered to the market. For the same reason, YouTube has switched from counting number of videos watched to number of minutes watched, with the same rationale. Airbnb and eBay are two-sided marketplaces. So they essentially measure value by how well the marketplace is functioning. And they measure the number of nights booked or the gross merchandise volume, which is basically how many dollars are exchanging hands between buyers and sellers. A marketplace is there to connect the two sides and to enable them to transact. Notice that Airbnb and eBay are not focusing on how much profit they're making or which transactions are most profitable to them. This is about value delivered to the market. Once we have these metrics mapped out, we can start creating a sort of a roadmap. So imagine this scenario. You're in the all-hands meeting, the CEO shows up. She starts telling you the mission statement again, and you can almost see everyone's eyes glazing because they heard the mission. It's very abstract. They don't see how it's connected to their day-to-day work. But let's say she moves on to show a roadmap like this and reminds everyone, our North Star metric is the number of documents created. We're 20,000 documents created per month right now. But by the end of the year, we want to reach 35,000. That's a growth of 70-something%. And the top KPI is revenue. We want to reach from 2.1 million to 2.7 million. These are the goals for this year. If you're not working on something that is contributing to either one of those, you should talk to your manager. You can just imagine how the atmosphere changes in the room. All of a sudden, and maybe for the first time, everyone understands what the leadership team is optimizing for, what's success for them. That's basically because they use this tool called the North Star metric and top KPI. Next, I want to talk about evidence-based decisions. A lot of companies call this data-driven decisions, but I don't think the data-driven is exactly the same as evidence. I will try to explain. And the tool I will give you is the confidence meter. So let's take an example. This is like an ordinary example from a product team. Let's say that you develop an online video training platform for enterprises. A few key customers ask for 4K streaming support. Sales estimate this feature will generate an additional $6 million per year. Engineering estimates that 4K streaming is going to double the load on the servers. And once you dig into the data, you realize that only 14% of user devices actually support 4K. Should you build this feature? How do we tackle this question? So obviously, there are some bits and pieces of information in there. A few key customers ask for it. Sales estimate that it's going to be a big thing. Engineering estimates it's going to create a lot of load. And there's one really concrete piece of data there that only 14% of user devices support 4K. Now we can lock ourselves in the room and debate on this, and different people will have different opinions depending on which piece of data they latch onto. And we can estimate impact. Is this going to drive more value to the market? Is this going to create more revenue for us? That's a good thing to estimate. We can estimate cost, of course, that's very important. But all of these things are subject to biases. We have risk aversion, we have narrow framing, we have sunk cost fallacy. There's a million different cognitive biases that cause us to sometimes misjudge ideas. So to balance all of this, we have a third element, which we called confidence. Not just impact and cost, but confidence. And confidence is asking, how sure are we that the idea will have the expected impact? How do you answer such a question? So again, you need to look at the evidence. What evidence do we have that this is actually going to be a high impact idea? And to answer this question, I created this tool, which I call the confidence meter. And it works a little bit like a thermometer. It goes from very low confidence, which is the blue area, all the way to very high confidence, which is the red area. And you can see there's different clusters, different groups of types of evidence with weights. So all the low confidence stuff is actually tied to opinions, either your own opinion, or the opinion of your team or your managers, or the opinion of the industry. If the industry thinks now blockchain is hot, does it mean that your idea about blockchain is necessarily good? Absolutely not. Every bad idea out there, someone thought it was a good idea. So opinions give us very low confidence. In order to gain more confidence, we need to start evaluating the idea on paper with estimates and plans and various forms of evaluation of risk and profit. Then we can start collecting evidence and maybe finding some anecdotal evidence, like a few customers actually ask for this, or one competitor has it. And by the way, a lot of companies stop here, and if one competitor has it and there's some opinions ruling, like the most important person in the room thinks it's a good idea, that's enough to go ahead and invest in the idea. But we actually realize now that this is low confidence. We want to move higher to medium confidence through market data, then user and customer evidence, finally tests. And the hardest tests are A/B experiments. And finally, the thing that gives us complete confidence is post-launch data. So this is a tool that's actually being used today by quite a few product companies around the world. And they're using this to cut through the hype, cut through the opinions, the debates, and to just basically ask themselves, do we have enough evidence? And if not, go out and collect stronger evidence. Next, I want to talk about agility. Now, it's good to stop here and say something very important. Agility is not one-to-one the same as agile development. A lot of teams or people equate the two, but they're not necessarily the same. Agility is about our ability to react to new information fast and accurately. So it's basically about our ability to change our plans. And I'm going to give you not one, but two tools to actually deal with that. When we have an idea that we like, we tend to do this. We build a project around it, we get very excited. It's not just going to take 3 months, and then we launch it, and it will be awesome, and we will discover whether or not the users love it. Unfortunately, two things happen. First, it doesn't take 3 months, it takes 6 months. Second, we defer the learning until the end. And only then do we realize whether or not we found a good idea. And unfortunately, the statistics are very clear. Most ideas are actually not good. So instead, we need to do this. And everyone knows this today. We kind of need to embrace the lean methodology and to start by testing as fast as possible very early versions of the idea. Initially just a concept, and then if that concept pans out, we can learn a little bit the direction, change a little bit the idea, and then test again with a more evolved version, then yet a more evolved version. And finally, if the idea still survives all of these tests, we go to launch. And obviously our confidence grows as we run through those different tests, because they are kind of pushing us through the confidence tool. Each one of those culminates in what I call a learning milestone. Learning milestone is basically we learn something about the ideas, about the assumptions, about the risks, and about what works and what doesn't work. Now, everyone knows this, but I found that many companies really struggle with implementing this concept of build, measure, learn. And part of the reason in my mind is that a lot of companies don't realize or don't understand the full gamut of validation methods that are available to us. So I kind of try to put everything in one picture, and I call this the AFTER framework, which stands for assessment, fact-finding, tests, and experiments, and release. So basically, even before we go out and collect any evidence, leave the room, leave the building, build any tests, we can start by just assessing the idea on different aspects. Does it align with the goals? Can we create a business model around it? We just heard Tendayi explain very well why this is important. Can we do ICE analysis, assumption mapping, and yet another very powerful tool? Is it going to conflict with any of our stakeholders? It's best to realize this early and have a one-on-one discussion with that stakeholder. If the idea survives assessment, we can move on to fact-finding. That's really going into digging into the data, finding facts, like the fact that only 14% of user agents support 4K. And then running surveys, user interviews, competitive analysis, field research. This is just a subset of the many ways we can use in order to find facts. Ideas that survive that can go further into tests, and there are early tests. We just test mostly the concept before the idea is built. Midterm tests that we have a somewhat fleshed out idea, but not fully. And then late tests where the idea is almost complete. And there's also experiments. Experiments are different from tests in the sense that they have a control element and they give us much stronger evidence. Finally, even the release itself can be a test. So as we launch, we can stop at, say, 30% and check, does this idea still work? It's like a giant A/B experiment. We can do a holdback experiment, and we definitely need to process post-launch data. So being aware of this and being aware that on the left-hand side, we have very cheap, very fast, very easy methods to assess ideas, and we only need to go on the right, and as we go more and more into the right, it becomes more and more expensive and much higher confidence. We should go through different funnels, push the ideas through these different funnels, and not jump to the end too early. And that actually enables teams and companies to run through many, many ideas much quicker and validate ideas with lower cost. Now, I have a framework that I like to teach, which is called GIST. It stands for Goals, Ideas, Steps, and Tasks, and it basically puts together all of these concepts that I just covered. And I will argue in a second that it also empowers teams, which is the fourth principle, which I didn't cover just yet. So the principle behind GIST is extremely simple. We need to start by deciding on goals. And goals basically state what we want to achieve. And I just gave you an example a few minutes back about this CEO that shares the goals in a very clear way using the North Star metric and the top KPI. Another way to do goals is with sub-metrics, with OKRs. And all of these are good tools to state out what are we trying to achieve without defining how. Then we move into ideas. Ideas are hypothetical ways to achieve the goals. There's always more than one way to achieve goals, so it's good to test multiple ideas. And here's where we incorporate the concept of evidence. We don't just choose the ideas that the highest paid person likes or that the committee chose. We actually choose ideas based on their evidence. And I think this is a concept that Tendayi mentioned as well. We invest based on our level of confidence, which is kind of the opposite of risk, if you like. Then there are steps. Steps are short projects, usually not longer than 10 weeks, that culminate in a learning milestone, develop the idea, and validate it. So we need to basically do these steps. They're basically build, measure, learn loops, and manage them in order to move forward with the idea. And the last layer is tasks. Tasks is what we manage today in Kanban boards or in Jira. And they're basically those tickets or these user stories or these elements that we are actually implementing on a day-to-day basis. Gist doesn't try to teach a new way, but it does try to get the team involved in more than just the tasks, to connect the tasks to these higher level layers to create a full stack of planning that the team can be involved in. And a good way to do this is using the Gist board. The Gist board is a project management tool that is very simple. It could be a physical board. It could be also a digital board. And essentially, you list on it the goals with the key results you want to achieve and where you're standing today, the ideas that you're testing right now, and the steps, the next few mini projects that you will run in order to validate the ideas with owners. And it's a very useful tool for teams to meet around the Gist board at least once every other week, just before they plan the sprint or the next iteration, and to go over left to right and see what's the status. Maybe some ideas have changed, maybe some ideas turn out to be not so good and we change them, maybe some steps have finished, etc. But it does help the team pull out from the day-to-day of coding and designing and reminds them of the bigger picture. And that makes them a lot more connected with the business and actually a lot more satisfied in the day-to-day work. So everything I just described to you is actually available for you guys to read online. You can join my newsletter, and also I've published articles in my blog about these topics. The confidence calculator is actually, the confidence meter is available as a downloadable calculator online that you can find in this link. There's an editable Gist board that you can download as well. I published an ebook that covers the After framework about how to test product ideas. And I'm also writing a book right now about Gist. And you can get early access options to it if you follow this link. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer right now. Kai, I think you are muted.
That's the second time I've done that. Thank you very much for that. That was fascinating. A question that came to my mind immediately was about Gist, and I was interested to know what product teams and development teams are doing poorly that you saw the Gist sort of resolved. You know, what was the thought process that led to the development of that particular tool?
Okay. What led to it is my own failures over the years, among other things. It's actually something that I cover in the book. I kind of stumbled on Gist, or obviously it's not an original, completely original framework. A lot of the concept in there existed before me, but I've kind of stumbled on it in Google, in Gmail, when I did this particular project, and something clicked. I felt this is very different from before. And some of these mistakes that I've done in the past are, for example, focusing on output goals instead of outcome goals. I would state in the OKRs, let's launch this feature, let's integrate with this system. That's obviously not a very good goal. So Gist is kind of pushing you to express your goals in North Star metric terms or in other metrics terms, and then move into the ideas. And give yourself the freedom to explore many ideas. Another thing that I did was commit to ideas way too early, and there was overinvestment. There was this mentality of pitching the idea, getting the funding, and then running with it. I think Tendayi spoke to this as well. And that's something that now, just like Tendayi, I'm trying to hold off teams and say, don't run to ask for funding. Go and validate it first, cheaply, and then come back with evidence. That will make it much easier for you to ask for funding. It's also, evidence is a very good tool to kind of stop ideas that come top down from your manager or from stakeholders, to be honest. So it goes both ways.
And the goals in Gist, are they're organization goals rather than user goals, are they?
No, not necessarily. I mean, OKRs can span anything. You can put their organizational goals as well, but what you really need to give product teams are business goals. And business goals could be, revenue targets, but that's usually, unless it's a monetization team, it's really hard for them to work on it. But the better goals are expressed in outcomes. And outcomes are typically changes in human behavior. So usually your users behave differently, or the customers, but sometimes it's your sales team or some other internal team that you want to improve the way they work. So those are the best goals to give teams. These are business goals as well, by the way. And teams react very well when they are given these goals because they understand what's expected of them rather than just being handed off a product backlog and just build this for me.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's nothing worse than doing that, is there? We've got a question here from Jamie Meredith. Just was great when I saw you in Manchester Mind the Product. Do you have any real life example of being able to use this in transformation or rebuild? We have huge MVPs. I feel like that should have an exclamation mark after it.
Yeah, this is a tough one. So the challenge here is not to succumb to this temptation of like, the sky is falling, unless we rebuild the whole thing or transform or just go into this like 6 months, which turns into 6 years sometimes, transformation or rebuild, nothing will happen. There's always a way to chop these things down. And once you go to a rebuild, actually, I see the world like there's two budgets. There's budget for business ideas and there's budget for ongoing engineering work. So continuous refactoring, for example, absolutely you need to allocate budget for this. But if you're on the engineering team comes to you and say, we have to rebuild the whole thing, they're actually stepping into the business area. There needs to be a business reason why we need to rebuild everything or we need to transform everything. And once you go there, then there needs to be a way to validate that the rebuild would actually lead to that expected business result. So the challenge you need to push on your team is like, show me some evidence that you're actually going to lead in this way. Find ways to cut the projects and show me that in the middle already we're starting to see some sort of improvement. It's hard to do, but it's doable. So don't succumb to the temptation.
Well, from the same individual, we've got I ran out of space, lol, which makes me think that there was probably more to that question than was posted. If Jamie wants to find out more about what you do you have a website that you could post him to, or?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's very easy. It's like my name, itamargilad.com. It's itamargilad.com.
Excellent. No, that's wonderful. And if somebody wants to reach out for you with any questions, what's the best way to do that? Is that Twitter or Medium or?
LinkedIn works well. There's also some forms on my website for questions. Twitter, you guys pick your choice.
No, that's wonderful. So Jamie's just messaged and said, thanks. Thanks, I will follow and reach out. So please do expect to be bothered by Jamie. Thank you very much for your time this evening. We're incredibly grateful for the time you spent with us. I hope that the community gained lots from it. And I'm, I dare say our paths will cross again. Thank you very much for your time, Itamar.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
No worries. Pleasure to host you. Thank you very much. Take care now. Bye. Hi, so that's just me now. That's the end of the stream. Thank you everyone who joined us. The videos will be, or the live stream will be available online if anyone wants to go back and review any of those slides. Our next event is in September. As I mentioned at the start, we're just finalizing the details for that. We'll put something out to the community as soon as we've confirmed that. And in the meantime, take care everyone, and we'll catch you soon. Thank you very much for joining.